Today's Old Testament reading comes from Isaiah chapter 40, verse 1 through 11. Comfort, comfort my people, says God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Tell her that her sad days are gone and her sins are pardoned. Yes, the Lord has punished her twice over for all her sins. Listen, it's a voice of someone shouting, "Clear the way through the wilderness for the Lord. Make a straight highway through the wasteland for our God. Fill in the valleys and level the mountains and hills. Straighten the curves and smooth out the rough places. Then the glory of God will be revealed, and all people will see it together. The Lord has spoken." A voice said, "Shout." I ask, what should I shout? Shout that the people are like grass. Their beauty fades quickly as the flowers in the field. The grass withers and the flowers fade beneath the breath of the Lord, and so it is with people. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of God stands forever. O Zion, messenger of God's good news, shout from the mountaintops. Shout it louder, O Jerusalem. Shout and do not be afraid. Tell the towns of Judah, your God is coming. Yes, the sovereign Lord is coming in power. He will rule with a powerful arm. See, he brings his reward with him as he comes. He will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will carry the lambs in his arm, holding them close to his heart. He will gently lead the mother sheep with their young. The gospel reading comes from Mark chapter 1, verse 1 through 8. This is the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. It began just as the prophet Isaiah had written, "Look, I am sending a messenger ahead of you, and he will prepare your way." He is a voice shouting in the wilderness, "Prepare the way for the Lord's coming. Clear the road for him." This messenger was John the Baptist. He was in the wilderness preaching that the people should be baptized to show that they have repented of their sins and turned to God to be forgiven. All of Judea, including all the people of Jerusalem, went out to see and hear John. And when they confessed their sins, he baptized them in the Jordan River. His clothes were woven from coarse camel hair, and he wore a leather belt around his waist. For food, he ate locust and wild honey. John announced, "Someone is coming soon who is much greater than I am, so much greater that I am not even worthy to stoop down like a slave and untie the straps of his sandals. I baptize you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit." These are the words of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. For many people, their most intense fear is public speaking. Here are two comments about that. The first is from the late baseball player Cool Papa Bell. He said, quote, "They say people are more afraid of public speaking than they are of snakes. It doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, you don't see someone walking through the desert suddenly shouting, 'Watch out, a podium!'" And the second is from comedian Jerry Seinfeld. Again, I'm quoting, "According to most studies, people's number 2 fear is death. People's number 1 fear is public speaking." Does that sound right? That means for the average person, if you go to a funeral, you're better off in the casket than doing the eulogy. Well, whatever your fears are, in whatever order they may come, remember this: with God's help, we need to encounter what we fear. In the movie Batman Begins, the writers added a new wrinkle to the question of why Bruce Wayne chose to dress up as a bat. In this version, Wayne, as a little boy, was terrified of bats. As an adult, he was told that in order to develop into a champion, he had to become what he feared. He dressed up as a bat then to become the embodiment of his phobia. Bats are about as scary as winged creatures get, but here's one winged creature as scary as a bat: the locust. In most of the Old Testament times into the New Testament times, over a period of thousands of years, locusts were connected with plague, attack, and destruction. Their name brought fear to the hearer. What did John the Baptizer do with locusts? He ate them. What was his reaction to this harbinger of fear? Hey, they're not bad with honey on them. Great source of protein. For him, they were health food. And that reminds us how, working with God's grace, we can turn the negatives in our lives into positives. Like the old saying, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. God can make that happen in your life, but you need to do your part. Now, this isn't to make light of the tragedies that befall us. The death of a loved one, serious health issues, worries about keeping your job or home and relationships and so forth are real and significant. Complicated problems rarely have simple solutions. We've heard many stories, though, of tragedy turned to triumph. A differently abled athlete becomes a champion in Paralympics. An untimely death of a child from cancer or AIDS causes the creation of a foundation that raises millions of dollars to fight that disease. In Greek and Egyptian mythology, the mythical bird, the phoenix, is reborn from its ashes. How can our lives experience something like that? Let's listen some more to the baptizer. John's message echoing that of Isaiah. Prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. Are those words about doing that which it takes to be in a right relationship with God? Of course they are. We prepare God's way by living Christian lives, by doing that which is good, by turning away from the bad stuff. Mark's gospel then, its Christmas story really, starts out with a call to piety, reverence for God and God's ways. Understand how that connects with God working in and with you to turn troubles to triumphs. God took Abraham, the aged, Moses, the murderer, and David, the delicate, and made them heroes. This happened with Abraham, Moses, and David, as well as with Sarah, Miriam, Mary Magdalene, and many others who had faith in and paid attention to God. The call of John in the wilderness then was a call to sacrifice, absolutely, but it was also a call to success. Would you like to succeed? Would you like to improve your condition? Would you like to see the rotten stuff in your life turn to good stuff? If so, make those paths straight. Make those paths straight so God can come in. You can have great wealth and power, but like Ebenezer Scrooge and Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol, your life will be empty, a wilderness, unless God is in it. When God comes in, you can work together with God to face and deal with and overcome your fears. Your obstacles won't magically melt away, but we can face them and we can do our best with the proper attitude. If we don't overcome our fears and obstacles, they usually overcome us, destroying many of our opportunities for good and for success. This morning's Old Testament reading was probably especially appropriate and helpful for the Hebrew people when they were in exile. It was a tough time for them. They were away from God's land, their land. When fear overcomes you, it's easy to feel like you're in a strange land, exiled from your regular life. Even if you're in your home or your workplace, you're somewhere where you are a lot physically, you still have a feeling maybe that you're in a strange and different place. So God's message of comfort is important for you to remember. So practical tips for facing your fears. Pray. When you connect with God and you know that relationship with God is there, not only speaking to God, but listening to God, that helps you to become stronger. Take some time out and distract yourself for a while. Often the solutions to difficult problems come when we spend time away from the problem and then go back to it. Look at the evidence of what's actually going on. Often we make problems and obstacles tougher than they truly are. And avoid sinning. Now that's something you expect to hear a minister say in a sermon, but too often people, when they're in times when they're scared, they do what's wrong. They say later, oh, I know it wasn't the right thing to do, but I was scared. But, when they're in that time of fear and they do something wrong, it makes it worse. So it's especially a time when you're in fear to stay away from acting badly. Visualize a happy place that can help you focus. And talk about your fear with someone you can trust. Another pair of ears, another brain, and heart can be helpful. Make sure you eat and sleep well. You can't overcome a fear if it overcomes you. And if you're faced with a big fear, you overcome it, reward yourself with something afterward. All of these methods, can apply to groups as well as individuals. Sometimes groups are also facing fears, whether it's a company you work for, social service agency, extended family, a group of friends. Groups have fears too. And groups can be tougher in fears because the people have to work together to face what they fear. But groups also can overcome fears more easily because in a group of people you have people with different skills and talents and abilities. Remember that difficulties faced can bring blessings. It was so with Jesus. The suffering of one day became the salvation offered on all days. So if crucifixion can bring Christianity, if an instrument of tortuous death can become a symbol of hope, then God can turn around the hardships in our lives. We don't normally think of fear when we think of Christmas, except maybe that the shepherds were scared by the angels. But the first Christmas happened in a time of great worry and concern for the people of Israel. They were oppressed under Roman rule. As we sang, they hadn't heard from God in a special way for around 400 years. So people had great anxieties and anxious time, much like today. And it was into this atmosphere that Jesus was sent, that Jesus was born. Even today, Christmas can be a stressful time. Well, they like the presents I got them. Do the decorations look okay? Am I ready for the crowds and the relatives and the bills? But whatever negatives we face in this time of the year, we need to focus on the positives to overcome the negatives, and it's the same way with life. Face your fears, eat your locusts. That way you can move forward, making your path straight, making the path straight for God, which will help God's will and help you. Accepting and building upon the grace God gives you, you can turn the negatives in your life into positives. But to do that, we need to eat the locusts. We need to encounter and deal with whatever it is that we fear. This morning, I can hang around a little bit, shake hands with people, greet some of you after the service. So let's turn to the closing song now, and then we'll follow that song up with the benediction and the Amen.